from Hog Sports in here. Connor, what's going on, my friend? How are you? We are coming off our opening message board segment, which often requires us to, at this point, narrow our focus and get a little serious. So we're glad you're here.
Yeah, appreciate y'all having me on. Always fun to catch y'all's conversations before I hop in here. It's interesting stuff, man.
We can get a little weird if you like as well, too, Connor. Just let us know, and we are ready to go.
Yeah, I'm up for anything, man. You know I'm an easy guest, man.
Well, we're taking a hard turn into basketball season, and for the average SEC fan, I would say that that first month and a half, really the non-conference for sure, really gets lost in the end of football season. Oh, yeah. However, some schools are ready to turn the page. Not the best year for Arkansas on the gridiron, obviously. You get some positive momentum with coaching hires in a lot of schools across the SEC where that's able to lighten the mood just a little bit. But in Arkansas specifically, you have a coach in John Calipari who has had a lot of success. And I would say this is the most talented team that he's had since he's been at Arkansas. And the run that they made last year in the NCAA tournament was something that really piqued my interest going into this season, because I was telling Craig earlier, Connor, I don't know that it really matters exactly where they finish in terms of the seeding, because we're going to get to this, but the SEC is so kind of jumbled up. I'm going to trust a team that now has some experience, that has some veteran leadership, and a coach like John Calipari when they get to the tournament in March to be somebody that I'm looking at to make a run. Whether they elevate through the end of this season and they end up as a 3 or a 4 seed, or they stay inconsistent and they end up being like a 9 or a 10 seed, whatever the case may be, I've got my eye on them. I would not want to be a 1 seed who catches them coming out of that 8-9 game. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that this team is built like those typical John Calipari teams that have gone on deep runs and had success in March. You've got the fabulous freshman duo of Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff, who are really kind of the offensive engine. But some of the key cogs from last year's deep tournament run, Trevin Brazil, DJ Wagner, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond also, he's like the Energizer Bunny for this team. Probably one of the most fun players to watch just individually, just how he comes in and completely changes the complexion of the game with his injury or with his energy. You've got those key cogs back with those freshman guys that can kind of, on nights when they're struggling, on paper, it's good to have that experience. You also have veterans like Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle. So this team is built to go on runs, to go on a deep run, and they're built for success. They're still just not there. And you've got to be able to carry some of that energy and success onto the road. And what we've seen these first 2 weekends is, you go to Auburn, you have that short turnaround from Oxford to Auburn. You narrowly hang on and beat Ole Miss, and then you get really humbled by Auburn. And then Arkansas this past weekend, they get a blowout win over South Carolina midweek. They go to Athens, and they really got it put on them early on, and then they fought back, tied the game late, but they used all their energy to come back after digging such a big hole. So the talent's there. The raw, this offense is one of the best Arkansas fans have seen in honestly since the 90s, really, just from a statistical standpoint. But the talent's there, the offense is there. You got to shore up some things defensively, but that blueprint, it looks really nice. And like you said, Rob, this team, it's going to catch some people's eyes. When they beat Texas Tech, when they almost beat Duke, they beat Louisville at home. That was kind of turning some heads early in the national scene. And so I think that now they've kind of hit a lull. They're trying to rediscover themselves through conference play and pick up some of these bigger wins on their resume. They're still just not quite to the level I think that they need to be to go on a run, but you can kind of see them progress a little bit further each time out.
Yeah, I mean, the recipe is there. And you mentioned the Duke game and they lost that game. It is something that really stuck in my mind, their ability to play so closely with the Blue Devils. Here, the recipe is exactly what you said. A couple of freshman phenoms, and then you need some veteran presence. And DJ Wagner, to me, really is one of those guys that really holds that all together. Somebody who's been with Cal for a while, somebody who sees it, somebody who understands. You talked about Brazil, you talked about Carter Knox, guys who have just kind of been around and were there for last year's run, I think bring a lot to the table when it comes to this year. What have you seen in terms of the rest of the SEC as you've kind of seen Arkansas move up and down with these teams? Is there one group of talent on another team that sticks out to you? Because as it stands to me right now, we can look at the standings, but you've got teams like Vanderbilt and Georgia kind of hanging around towards the top. It doesn't make a lot of traditional, historical, logical sense. And it's a little bit jumbled up in there, and we don't have anybody emerging as a front runner just yet. What do you think?
Yeah. The Vanderbilt's success, I think, this year has really stood out to me. Obviously, Mark Byington, really big fan of what he's been able to do in his career, and obviously what he's been able to do in his short time in Vanderbilt. They actually come into Fayetteville Tuesday night for a big game against Arkansas, but they're a team that's really stood out to me that I think that a lot of people had them on fraud watch earlier in the season, but I think that they've proven that they can really hang with some of these elite teams. Florida, as bad as Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee had looked earlier in the season, they're starting to come along, and as they come along, that you can kind of see the vision with this Florida ball club. And I think that people kind of had them written off after they went, I think they started 5-4 on the year. But now you look at them, I think they're atop the SEC standings, and with that championship pedigree, their front court is exactly what you would want in an experienced championship type front court. So they're a team that I think that has kind of flown under the radar because of their bad start earlier in the season, but they're right there picking up where they left off in conference play last year. So they're a scary team. Nate Oates is always going to have Alabama really, really good. He's got that kind of thing rolling. They're battling some injuries with certain guys, but they're really kind of, I think, a team that scares me if I'm an Arkansas fan, and some of these other teams, that they're a team that I think could get hot and really, really do some damage.
I think you saw that last night too with Georgia. They have really picked up. I think this year they've been kind of slowly progressing, and this year it seems like when they're shooting the hell out of the ball, they're going to be tough to beat. And to me, if they can stay hot, that's a team that can maybe make a run in the NCAA in the SEC tournament, also the NCAA tournament. Anything you saw out of the Dogs this weekend that you thought was that you've seen growth out of the team, from the past couple of years?
Their big man Somto Cyril, he finished with 6 points, 5 rebounds, or something like that. Career high 7 blocks though. In Arkansas, I think was 13 of 28 on layups because of his paint presence. And that dude, he was originally committed to Cal at Kentucky before he was hired, obviously, at Arkansas during that offseason. I think he was one of his first commits in that class. Obviously opts to go to Georgia over Arkansas once Cal, moves over. But he was a guy that I've been really watching. He was a lot raw. I think he came into Athens a little bit, on the heavier side in terms of, conditioning and stuff like that. But as Georgia has kind of, Mike White's really changed their kind of game plan to go into this crazy up-tempo playing with this insane pace. He's kind of really fit that really well to be able to, kind of give them an interior presence in the half court, but he's really, really strong, running in the open floor. He's really impressed me, and just his physicality and intimidation that he gives other teams to when they have to second guess themselves when they bring it inside. That really kind of unlocks a different dynamic. Obviously, Jeremiah Wilkinson, usually when you get these high usage, high volume guards from, transferring in from different places, it's hard for them to keep that same production level. But Jeremiah Wilkinson's a guy that I've been really pleasantly surprised with how he's jumped in and really been able to elevate his game to another level with Georgia, which is kind of rare to see these days with high level transfers. So Mike White's got a good thing going. Georgia's a really, really good team, and it would not shock me if we look up that second weekend and the Dogs are there.
One more question outside of Fayetteville, and then we'll bring it back in.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Auburn earlier. You got obviously another matchup with them coming up. The transition from Bruce Pearl to Stephen Pearl, not as smooth as the Auburn fans would have liked. They've become a powerhouse in the past. But another thing that I would point out here is that you had some talent transition with this team from last year to this year too. And as good as Auburn was under Bruce Pearl year in and year out, this is still, I don't think, to the level of a program that reloads like a program like a Duke or somebody that they faced off with or were matched up in the tournament. So the expectations, our friend Mike Morgan always says something along these lines, who called the Arkansas South Carolina game on ESPN the other night. He says that the high watermark for any program is where fans set their expectations every year. So whatever the best thing that you've ever done is, that's where every fan expects you to be. That high watermark is pretty high in Auburn, Alabama, in the jungle right now. But they've just been a little inconsistent getting it going. When you look at a team like an Auburn, you mentioned Florida as well. You know Boogie Flan well, right? You've seen him play.
Yeah.
They're trying to get it together. They're coming off of a national championship. You have a lot of these middle-tier teams. Arkansas fits right in the middle there, where you've had some big moments this year, and then you've had some kind of head-scratching moments. If you're looking at it right now, who sticks out to you that's going to elevate out of that middle tier in the SEC? Is there a team or two that says, "Hey, we're going to start taking over this thing"? Because we're in the thick of the conference schedule at this point, and we're about to start rolling and start defining some seasons.
Well, I'll be honest. I had Kentucky kind of dead in the water a couple of weeks ago, man, and they're a team now that is kind of in that middle tier. They look to, they have their flaws, obviously, but they're a team that I think you can't discount what they've been able to do the past two games, which is, I mean, obviously they're playing with fire, being down 16 every game and coming back, but just the ability to come back and dig themselves out of those holes and be able to have the resilience to actually finish those comebacks off, I think is really impressive to me. And I think that, the momentum that builds game to game can't be discounted. And so they're a team that I think could really kind of elevate themselves into this mix. Auburn's another one you talked about a little bit there. The change from going to Bruce Pearl to Stephen Pearl, well, on paper, some people might scoff at it and say, well, he's been around the program. It can't be that. It's a lot different. It's different when there's a voice leading these guys, a different voice leading these guys. Obviously, he's probably going to have the same characteristics as his dad did, but it's completely different. The way he approaches individuals on the team is probably different. And so naturally, you need to adjust those expectations. But what I saw from Auburn, obviously, is when they're desperate and when they kind of play with that edge and that back against the wall mentality, they can compete with anyone in the country. It's just being able to harness that on nights when maybe the motivation and the rivalry, the intensity of the game's not quite there. And just, over the course of 40 minutes, being able to consistently have your guys like Keyshawn Hall, like Tahad Pettiford, kind of put it together. And I think that with Auburn, man, you can't discount, in addition to the change from Bruce Pearl, they lost a lot of production from that team and a lot of veteran guys who had kind of been through the mud, been through the trenches on all these, wars in conference. But you can't discount them losing all of that and then having to kind of refill their arsenal. I think it was something like 80% of their production or some crazy stat from last year. But they're kind of going through it a little bit, finding their way, but they're a team that has shown that they can compete with anyone and beat anyone. So I think that as we kind of go along, if they're able to figure it out, they can be really dangerous as we get into the thick of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what Steven's figuring out is hey, I'm not daddy. And it's a little bit tough. And let's be honest, Bruce has done it a lot of different places. He's been really successful. And it's always easy to be the assistant when you're in the background. But
right.
now when you're the guy, it makes it a little more difficult. So.
Well, what was funny is last year at the SEC tournament, in Nashville, I was actually sitting behind they have the first row, then the second row, which is the first row is TV scores table or whatever. Arkansas is playing Ole Miss in that second round game. Winner went on to play Auburn. So Auburn's coaching staff came over and was scouting, and I was watching Stephen Pearl kind of clip up some clips of both teams' offenses and kind of label them and do that. And whenever the other assistants came over to him, he was it was almost like directing minions. Like he was just kind of directing them. He's like, all right, so we need this, 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 and this, kind of giving them the rundown. A little bit later, Bruce came in and Steven kind of gave him the update of where they were. So even then, even before like I even thought that Bruce would, step down, it was kind of in the back of my head. I was like, maybe one day he's going to get, he's going to get his shot maybe a little bit sooner than we expect. And so that just little anecdote has always stuck with me, that he was kind of directing traffic and getting people kind of where they needed to go. And the dad came in and was like, yeah. So, but he just needs to find himself, find his own style and his own brand. I think that there's no question he could probably get that thing rolling just as Bruce had it.
No doubt about it. Connor, two more things and we'll get you out of here. One last on the basketball front. Obviously, you mentioned kind of the upcoming schedule when it comes to Arkansas. You got a Vanderbilt team coming in that has, like you said, I think escaped the fraud zone, but is coming off a couple of losses. Yeah. What does it mean for Arkansas to get this one? As you mentioned, Arkansas has just been really up and down. They looked absolutely explosive against South Carolina in the midweek. Yeah. Can they recapture some of that offensive firepower against a Vanderbilt team that has been pretty salty all throughout the year?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key going in. Can they get that offense to play? And their offense has been really, really good in Bud Walton Arena. It's just been able, whenever they've had to travel away, getting that offense to travel with them or that defense and that effort to travel with them has been an issue. I think that it's a very important game for Arkansas. This next stretch of games, you have a lot of opportunities. You're going to be a favorite in the majority of like the next 7. I said coming into this, if Arkansas really wants to kind of maximize their seed potential for the NCAA tournament, they need to win one of these two, Georgia or Vanderbilt. They need to beat one of those, and then they need to kind of go on a run of like 6 or 7 straight here of this next stretch. And I think that sets them up to, if you split some of these other more toss-up games like Florida, Texas A&M, Alabama, if you split some of those games and you have that stretch of like 6 or 7 wins against quality teams, and you can maximize that seed potential where you're not stuck in that 8, 9, 7, 10, 6, 11 range where you're playing really solid, stout mid-majors or a Power 5 that's capable of beating you. And then, oh, by the way, you might have to go on and play a 1 or a 2 seed. You kind of escape that to where you can get into that 4 or 5 range where there's a little bit more leeway and you get a little bit better matchups. But yeah, so they have to beat Vanderbilt. They have to, one, there needs to be a really, really good environment in Bud Walton, which I think that the arena has done a pretty good job of getting people in there and filling it up and making it a really tough place to play. But you need that. You need the guys to come out focused, ready to kind of lick their wounds and get that bitter taste out of their mouth and kind of make a statement. And I think if Arkansas can really kind of get back to their roots, get back to what they've had success with defensively, and then also getting up and down and having really success and transition on offense. I think that you could see Arkansas really, really picking up a big win because they really need it. Like I said, they need it before this next stretch.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that like we both said, this is a team that's built to make a run. And and Craig and I said this before we got on the air, it's all going to be about those matchups in the tournament. And so seeding is going to be really, really important. You're not going to want to seed them on the other side of it. Even if they get a 1 or a 2 seed in the second round, let's say they get in that 8-9 slot and then have to play the 1, you're not going to want to see them as a 1 seed. But if Arkansas can avoid that matchup early, like obviously that's what you want to do, right? Okay, let's flip it back because there's no offseason in college football.
Yeah.
Anything in terms of let's do a little temperature check on Silverfield and the fan base. How are things progressing as we are in the full swing of the quote unquote SEC offseason now that no SEC teams are playing in the the national championship game?
You didn't have to bring that up.
Well, we do have a game left tomorrow night. It just doesn't happen to include anybody from the greatest conference.
No one even knows there's a game tomorrow night. No one's been talking about that.
But have you seen continued positive momentum with Ryan Silverfield, or do you feel like it's kind of all heads have turned to the hardwood?
I think for the most part you've seen people come around to the hire. That initial wave was because fans that really didn't expect Silverfield to be the guy. They'd kind of, obviously Goalish or someone else was really who everyone expected. So that initial shock and some outrage from some fan bases, I think, has really subsided. They had a lot of movement, but his opening press conference, they got commitments from two really important guys in Quincy Rhodes on the defensive line, and then KJ Jackson, the young quarterback who was with Arkansas last year. Getting those guys on board won some fans over. They were able to flip some high school guys early on who were in-state guys, and that brought some really positive momentum into the program. And then I think in the transfer portal, it's been they really had a run the first week in the transfer portal where they got some really big names. They really overhauled the secondary. I loved what they did in the cornerback room. I like what they've done with the linebackers. They've shored up the offensive line. Bryant Williams from Louisiana Lafayette, I think, is a really big time get. Probably one of the biggest additions of the offseason, but they still had some holes in safety and up front on the defensive line. You don't quite like where their depth is right now. They added like 3 or 4 safeties on Friday. And I think that fans are just cautiously optimistic. Some of them are more just, I need to see proof that this is actually going to work on the field before I can really, make a determination one way or the other. So I think that they've done what they needed to do in the transfer portal, maybe a couple of mistakes and turning down some guys at safety, some guys on the defensive line. But at the end of the day, with how Arkansas has struggled the last couple of years, none of this means anything for a large segment of fans until we get to Saturdays in the fall. Like they don't want to, hype this team up again and go through the whole offseason process where, they're drinking the Kool-Aid and stuff only for it to be another 2-win season. Like there's a large number of people that I talk to that are just like, this has to be, I'm not gonna overhype. I'm not gonna undersell. I need to see results. And so you can sell all these new recruits, this new offense, this new defense, all this other stuff. But if it doesn't result in W's, then a large segment of the fan base is going to be out immediately. So they really need to take this momentum from the portal and build on it and make that result in wins, big wins in the fall of 2026.
That's beautifully said. And, I think that is going to be the cry of so many programs.
Oh, yeah.
And the crazy thing is, as soon as this game is played tomorrow night and we wrap up portal stuff truly on Tuesday with the 48-hour business day window that we have to get everybody in, and the way spring ball has kind of evaporated, we're about to have a long and quiet off season to spin those exact thoughts over and over and over. Connor Goodson of Hog Sports. Connor, thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about a little Razorback basketball, and of course we slid some football in there too. Appreciate you as always, my friend.
Appreciate y'all having me on. Always good to talk to y'all.